You're listening to the InFocus Interview Show, brought to you by Photofocus.com, an online publication filled with education and inspiration for visual storytellers. This episode is made possible by our partners, Loom Cube, the world's most versatile light, and Drobo, a smart storage solution. Now here's your host, Vanelli.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vanelli. Now, my guest is a talented author, educator, travel photographer, and popular YouTube influencer specializing in travel photography and photo editing with over 500 free video tutorials. Please welcome Jim Nix. Hey, Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Vanelli. How are you today?
Oh, super great. Hey,
awesome.
We got together during Luminar's 14-hour marathon launch of Luminar 4.
We did. It was fun, too.
Good. Now, just as everyone knows, I'm part of Skylum. I'm the educational director for Skylum, and Jim is actually an affiliate, and you're one of the top educators that we have at Skylum.
Yeah, I've been affiliated with them for a number of years now. I've been doing a lot of tutorials back when it was Mac Fun, and they had things like Intensify Pro and Tonality and, those kind of things. And then Aurora HDR came along, and then, of course, Luminar, and I'm all in. I love the product.
Yeah, actually, you and I first met at Photo Plus before I started working full-time for Skylum. And that was a marathon day.
Yeah.
The 3 days that we did.
Yeah.
So
it was fun. It's always fun
Exactly.
talking about this stuff anyway.
Great. All right. So our topic today is going to be on how to find the top photo spots, because you do a lot of traveling photography. And I checked out your website. And what I really liked is you have a post about the top spots that you've enjoyed, and you list all the ones, you've gone through in the world.
Right.
So this is going to be a very interesting and informative podcast. So I guess first thing I want to ask you is, how do you plan your trips?
Yeah, good question. So, I'm definitely a fan of researching before you go. I think the old quote is like, you plan your work and then you work your plan. And, weather doesn't always cooperate. But for me, it comes down to a couple of things that I do before every trip. The first one, of course, is just your friend Google, right? Get on Google and start searching. And I'll search for things like, some of the best photo spots in wherever I'm going, right? I think we were talking about my London list that I have. I've been to London many times. I've compiled a pretty long list of great spots there. And some of them are obvious. Like if you're going to London, you're going to shoot Big Ben or the London Eye. But anyway, I always go to Google first and just kind of see what other people are saying. I want to get an idea of what some of the popular spots are, but I don't want to go get the same shot necessarily, because everybody wants to kind of put their own stamp on it. So I try to leave myself some time to experiment and walk around and sort of check out the spots. But Google's the first one. Second one is Flickr. I love Flickr. I've been on Flickr for, 10, 12 years or something. And whenever I'm on a trip, I'll just go look on their page there for interesting photos for certain locations. And you always come up with lots of ideas. And then I also just look at some travel blogs or travel sites that may be talking about things to do in certain cities. So that's kind of back to Google. Yeah, it just gives you an idea of, because I like to shoot architecture and street scenes. And so I want to know, like, what are some of the great architectural things? Well, they're going to list museums. They're going to list maybe big cathedrals on these, things to do in certain cities, kind of list that you'll find. And so those always give me ideas as well.
Wow, that's great. I'm going to throw one in there, believe it or not. Ready for this? Facebook.
Yeah.
Facebook. But if you type in the search bar, friends in London, any of your friends that live in London will appear.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So, and you could either, what is it called? Couch surfing? No. Invite yourself to their home. No. You could check out your friends and ask them.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, certainly. And I've gotten to where I've gone to London. I've got a couple of friends there now. So every time I go, they're like, well, what else do you want to see? So you end up, I just reach out to certain photographers. Like if I'm going to a specific location, and I happen to be a Facebook friend with somebody there whose, work I like and that I've been connected with, I'll often just reach out to them and say, hey, Vanelli, I'm going to be in such and such town. Looks like you're there. What do you say? Do you want to meet up and go walk around? And if you can find a local to walk you around, they always know the best spots because they live there. And frankly, I find it happens to me in Austin. People come to town and sometimes I go out shooting with them, and, you end up finding spots that you wouldn't really find otherwise because a local is showing you, and they obviously always have the best insights,
Well, that's great. Ironically that you mentioned that, my father, before he passed away, I lived in Syracuse my whole childhood and teenage. I left when I was like 23. So I went back to Syracuse and I said, hey, Pop, do me a favor. Take me around downtown Syracuse and the Syracuse you remember when you grew up as a kid.
Right.
He took me through so many incredible places and knew so much information. In fact, we went through Syracuse University, which we're right down the street from, and I ended up photographing Krause College.
Cool.
And it just looked like this huge castle. Well, Joe McNally and Lindsay Adler, that's where they went.
Oh, wow.
So it was neat. Years later, I gave Joe a print of Krause College. So, but because I asked my father, like you said, somebody who knows that area,
right?
He brought me to places I never knew we had in Syracuse.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, like the locals know, and you bring up a good point, which is universities, especially if you like to shoot architecture and things like that, universities are just ripe. Whenever I go to a city with a large university, I'll try to make it a point to get out there because usually the architecture is stunning and beautiful and grand and obviously photogenic, right? So that's always fun.
Well, that's great. Now, Jim, what's some of the best gear you'd recommend? Because sometimes people overpack, and especially if you're traveling overseas, that can get pretty expensive.
Yeah. So, that's a tough one because you always want to have everything, but you can't bring everything with you. So I've gotten over time to where I'll travel with like one mid-range zoom, like maybe a 24-70, and then also maybe a couple of primes. And I like primes. I do a lot of street scenes and kind of cityscape kind of, I hesitate to call it street photography because that has a certain implication, but it's kind of in that ballpark, let's say. And so prime lenses are great for that, especially in lower light where I can move fast and get shots without worrying about setting up my tripod. But for the bigger kind of grander scenes, I like to have, that mid-range zoom helps me get a lot of things like in London where I love to walk along the River Thames there through central London. There's so much to shoot. And that extra little bit of zoom range, like the 24-70 would give you, is great for, being on one side of the river and say shooting across to the other side to capture a building, maybe a reflection, that sort of thing.
Okay. Now, and honestly, so yes, we always strive to get it right in camera.
Yep.
And then crop in camera. But sometimes, like you're saying there, you are shooting across the river. Do you hesitate to get the shot? Or do you stop and, swap out lenses?
Yeah, so it depends. I mean, so some things like along the street, you just got to take the photo as soon as you can get it. Like if, there's somebody walking down an alley and they're in the perfect spot, you don't have time to change lenses. So you just take the shot. And then if you got to crop it, you've got to crop it. But like when I'm doing planned shots, for example, I'll definitely take the time, set up, get out the tripod. I might be using filters. I use a 10-stop filter. I really like long exposures, especially if there's water or like a nice cloudy sky where you can kind of get that movement in the both the water and the sky and capture that. I like to do those. So those are definitely take your time, set it up, and get it right. So I do a little bit of both, really, where some are from the hip. Oh my gosh, I'm in a hurry. I got to get this before anything changes. To all right, I'm going to take my time and plan it and set it up. So it's a little bit of art and science, I guess.
Okay, so the key there is don't get hung up on gear that you missed the shot.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's better to have a shot that you can crop and work with and come up with something that you like versus, plan to get the gear set up perfectly and then not have that moment back, right? So in other words, better to have a shot that you can work with, even if it's not ideal versus not having the shot at all. So So in other words, in short, yeah, take the shot. I mean, my gosh, for sure. I take the shot if I can.
All right, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Let's
Yeah.
say, now you're located where?
I live in Austin, Texas.
That's right, Texas. All right, how's the weather there right now?
It's kind of weird. It's in the mid 70s. We had a cold
Okay.
streak, and it's pretty warm today, although it's about to get cold again. So
Okay, well, yeah, we're in Florida here, and it's always sunny.
yeah, exactly. Sure.
So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Let's say I say, Jim, hop on the plane tomorrow. Come visit me. We're going to photograph, let's say, the UF campus, the FSU campus. We're going to do a lot of architectural stuff.
Okay.
Come on out. Quickly, what do you put in your bag?
So I shoot with a Sony camera, one of the A7 series. So obviously I'd grab that, and I would probably, based on what you said, which is going to be architecture and things like that, I'd probably grab my 24-70 as well as my wide angle, which is a 16-35. And then I've got a little prime as well. It's a 28 millimeter f2. I'd probably throw that in the bag just in case. We do some street stuff and lower light where I'm not setting up on tripod, but based on what you said about what we're probably going to shoot, I'd probably grab the 24-70 and then the wide angle, and of course the tripod, the remote release, those kind of things. Accessories is kind of a given, I guess. Memory cards, extra batteries, that sort of thing. But yeah, those two.
The reason why I'm asking is because sometimes people forget that. Like you just said, the accessories are a given.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people forget the cable release.
Right.
Or they forget extra memory cards, extra batteries.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a planner when it comes to traveling. So I'll pack my things several days in advance, and then I'll take them out, look at them again, and pack. It's a little bit OCD on my part, to be honest. But I would hate to be somewhere and say, "Oh, I want to do this," and then realize I didn't bring whatever it is that allows me to do whatever it is I want to do. So. I've definitely been on trips where you don't have everything. And, as we said earlier, you can't take everything. It's just, as I've gotten older, I've just gotten to where I want to travel lighter and I don't want to carry everything. I'm just too lazy or whatever the word is. But I still want to get the best shots I can with whatever it is that I take.
No, I think you're being proficient. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to Photoshop World and I would bring so many lights, soft boxes, tripods. I would bring light stands, all this gear.
Wow.
And it would cost me extra money. Well, I would put it, believe it or not, in a golf bag, like the hard case golf bag.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So they wouldn't charge me the over 70 pounds.
Right.
But the bad part was I'm so busy at Photoshop World, I never had time.
Right.
So now if I'm planning a trip like that, then obviously I would ask my friends who live there, hey, who has some extra lights, triggers, right. So I'd rather do that. Like if I were coming to visit you, I know you don't do a whole lot of portrait photography.
Right.
So I would probably ask, hey, what friends do you have that's local,
right?
That maybe we could borrow some of their stuff. So that's the whole part of planning what gear to bring.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, and to me, that all goes back to, the what you bring goes back to the very first question, which is, Jim, how do you figure out what you want to shoot? And then based on me figuring out what it is I want to shoot, that informs my packing, right? So if I know for sure I'm going to shoot architecture and long exposures, well, then I have to have my wide angle lens and I have to have my filters probably and my tripod. Whereas if I know I've only got limited time, I'm only going to see a few things, then I might say, you know what, I'm not going to bring the tripod or the wide angle. I'm going to bring 2 prime lenses and just travel light and just have a small side bag, So I'm very much, I actually get angry at myself sometimes when I pack more than I can use. And I get there and I'm like, God, I'm not even using this. I'm carrying it around. I get kind of mad at myself because I just want to be efficient. So it's kind of silly, but.
Now, a couple other things I throw in my bag. Have you ever seen those little Loom Cubes?
Yeah, I have one. It's fabulous.
Yep, I throw that in my bag because I need light, and I'll always throw a flash in just in case.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, just in case we do a portrait, and we're out there. Like imagine, let's say if we're in England and there you are standing at night, and right behind you is the beautiful, so I say Big Ben, but technically it's the tower, correct?
Yeah, so I think it's Big Ben is technically the bell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the bell itself.
everybody calls it Big Ben, including me, even though I've been informed otherwise. But I think it's called the Queen Elizabeth,
Yeah,
not Queen
exactly.
Elizabeth, or Elizabeth Tower, or something. I don't remember, but
Yeah, it's the
Big
tower.
Ben.
So I made a comment because Rich Harrington and I went to England, and well, they took us to 10 Downing Street,
Oh,
and there's
cool.
photos of us inside 10 Downing Street, which is a huge. I mean, it's a big deal, especially if you're English.
Yeah.
So I make a comment that, oh yeah, tomorrow we're going to photograph Big Ben, and someone writes back in, of course, you get permission. Nobody's allowed to see it. Like,
Right.
what are you talking about? You walk outside, it's right there. They go, oh,
Right.
no, that's the tower.
Yeah.
Big Ben is the bell. Nobody's
Yeah.
allowed to see that except, special guests.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, okay, that makes sense. Well, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
So, all right, good. So we talked about what proper gear to bring in, and I'm glad you brought up the point, efficiency, because again, when you like you've done a lot of traveling overseas. How do you compress everything? Like especially like a tripod.
Yeah, so as I said, I'm very much about traveling light, which for me is one of the primary reasons I went mirrorless many years ago. And so, even though I shoot this Sony A7 series, the cameras are smaller. The lenses aren't necessarily, because it's full frame, right? So that's where I try to be selective about what I'm bringing. But I have a think tank bag that I love that is not too big. It's I forgot what the name is, but it holds my laptop. It holds a water bottle on one side, tripod on the other, and I just try to just be smart about it, really, and get it all in the bag. And sometimes I'm like, golly, I need a bigger bag, but that's just an excuse to bring more stuff. I also find that, like, if you force yourself to use the tools that you have with you, then you know what, you may learn more about how to use the tools. And of course, there's the old thing, like you can zoom with your feet. So if you can't quite get the shot because you're too far away and your lens doesn't reach that far, maybe there's a way to reposition yourself so you can get closer by walking or something. You know what I mean? It doesn't always work like that, but the other thing it does for you is it causes you to perhaps have to get creative on site, and that's another way to sort of force yourself to think outside the box and not be hung up on, I want to get this shot because I've seen this shot 40 million times on Facebook and I want to have that shot. And so nothing wrong with getting the shot that everybody else gets, but I always try to come up with something a little bit different. I don't always succeed, and I don't want to pretend that I do. But if you have less gear with you, it certainly forces you to get creative on site, which is, can be good. This is a creative art after all.
Well, that's great. All right, Jim, let's talk about your favorite spots. But before we do, we like to take a few moments to announce our first winner in the Photofocus Celebrates 21 Years contest. This month's giveaway is presented by Xpozer. Now, you can show all your great photographs with Xpozer, makers of the photo frame that lets you easily change your photos in a matter of minutes. This lightweight photo framing system is perfect for anyone wanting to remember those family moments, that once-in-a-lifetime trip, or those amazing landscapes. You can learn more about Xpozer at Xpozer.com, and that's spelled with an Xpozer. Now, this month's winner is Jim Fanny. Congratulations, Jim. He just won up to $1,000 Xpozer gift card. So the Photofocus team will reach out to him shortly. And don't forget, you still have plenty of chances to win too. Get involved at Photofocus Celebrates 21 Years contest by going to photofocus.com/celebrate. So, yep, Jim. Now, it's funny because during our 14-hour marathon for the launch of Luminar 4, you saw behind me my Aviator series.
Yeah.
That was printed on Xpozer. They sent me one, and they sent me that one and my fencing prints. And what I could do is I could swap them out really fast. So how I looked at it was, if you have limited wall space, this is perfect, because then you put it up, for 3 months, you take it down and you put another print up. And you saw Scott Bourne had them at, in Skylum at our headquarters in Washington. It was the first time I've ever seen them. He had them, and I thought they were so expensive I could never afford them. And then I found out that they're not that expensive at all. I was like, oh man, why did I think of this earlier? But yeah, right. What I'll do with the Aviator, that's a picture of my little girl Erica. I've been photographing her since she was 5, and now she's 17. So I'll give her that one, and then I'll put the fencing prints up. So yes, that's really neat. I don't know if have you seen those yet or not, other than on my wall.
Yeah, I've seen them, but I don't know a whole lot about it, so I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah, it'll be great. All right, so Jim, let's talk about your favorite spots. And I was stalking you on your website, and that's where I got the idea. The most popular of my top photo spots list, and that's at is it nomadicpursuits.com?
Yeah, that is. Also just jimnix.com works. They both go to the same place.
Oh, great. All right, so let's talk about, now you have London, Austin, Prague, Paris, San Francisco, and Copenhagen. And you have an extensive amount, so we're not going to cover all of them, but let's talk about London. What are some of your favorite?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I always talk about when I'm traveling about being a photographer and not a tourist, but it's fun to be a tourist, to be truthful. You go places, you see stuff. And a lot of what I like about London are some of the well-known spots. So I'd say my favorite spots, the first one is not really a spot as much as it is an area. And that area is, as I mentioned earlier, like walking up and down the River Thames, kind of from around Westminster, where you do see, I was going to say Big Ben, but you don't actually see Big Ben, but you see the tower that Big Ben is in. From there down, you see wonderful bridges all the way down to Tower Bridge. So that's a long stretch. So that's not really a spot, but the entire area, I think, is just ripe. You've got London Eye, you've got a graffiti tunnel that's actually really close to the London Eye. You see the Millennium Bridge, you see St. Paul's Cathedral across the bridge. I mean, there's just so many things. You see the Shard. So I know that's not very specific, but just getting out and walking with the camera from one end to the other, I mean, you could spend the whole day doing it, honestly. But it's so rewarding, I think, and it's just beautiful. So I'd say that's spot number one. If you want my top 3, I'd say my second one, there's a, I don't know if it's a little known, but I didn't get there my first few trips until I found out it was in London, but it's over kind of on the east side, kind of north of the Tower Bridge, but it's called Leadenhall Market. And it's on that list. And it was actually used as a stand-in for a place called Diagon Alley in the Harry Potter movies.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you watch the Harry Potter stuff, you may go to the theme park there and enjoy that because you're in Florida. But I went. It's pretty cool. But Leadenhall Market is really cool. And it's just beautiful architecture, and you just have to see it. But it's a little bit out of the way, so it's not real easy to get to. But I highly recommend, you just take a train kind of near to the Tower of London and then do some walking. And it's probably a 15, 20-minute walk from Tower of London. But I recommend going on a weekend morning because during the week, the shops there are open. And so there's food stalls and things like that. But I've been there several times now on a Saturday or a Sunday morning. Like you get up and you just head over there. And I've had it all to myself. It's completely empty and it's just beautiful. And so I'd say that's probably one of my favorite spots in London. And then I'd say third is probably some of the train stations. I just love the architecture there. And, you can also do some semi like street photography type stuff in the train stations because people are coming and going. But like St. Pancras station, which is next door to King's Cross, they're both beautiful train stations, very different architecturally. And then there's a little lighted tunnel in there kind of underneath. I can't remember which one, but it's got these lights that change colors and you can get some really cool photos there too. So I'd say those are probably 3 of my favorite spots. It's just so fun and beautiful town.
All right. Now let's switch over to Copenhagen.
Okay. Yeah. Gosh. So Copenhagen, So I've been there 3 times, I think, and, again, the touristy thing is just going to what I historically called Nyhaven. It's Nyhavn, but I've got a friend who's, of Danish descent, and he's corrected me every time I said that, and I believe if I'm sure I'm gonna butcher it, but I believe they pronounce it Newhown or something like that, but basically, it's an old, harbor port area that has these really beautiful multicolored, kind of pastel colored buildings with a port area with boats in it in between. It's just basically an entertainment district now. And it is beautiful. If you look up Copenhagen, that's probably going to be the first thing you're going to see photos of. It's just gorgeous. I would say another great place is the palace there, where I think the Danish royal family lives. It's called Amalienborg. And it's gorgeous. And these are all really simple, or central, I should say, and thus easy to get to. Because right next to that palace is also a huge church called the Marble Church, which is just stunningly gorgeous. So those are probably my 2 favorites. And third would probably be Rosenborg Castle, which is also right in the center of town. It's got like a kind of a moat around it and some gardens. And this is beautiful. The whole town, the architecture is just stunning. So if you ever get to Copenhagen, you can check out my list, but just go wander. You're just going to love it. It's so beautiful.
A couple more. Let's do Prague.
Yeah, so Prague, golly, I spent almost a week there a couple of years ago, and I didn't want to go to sleep. It is arguably the most beautiful city I've ever seen. People always, say how beautiful Paris is, and Paris is gorgeous, but I think Prague has this medieval architecture, and the whole area. There were Old Town Square, and then Old Town, the streets there, and then over to the famous bridge which crosses the river and leads to the castle. It's just stunning. So I'd start with Old Town Square. You've got a church there, and you get up in their Old Town Hall with a view over that church and the town square. That is just absolutely stunning. You have to pay to go up the town hall, but it wasn't very much. And you get up in this little tower, and they only let a few up at a time, but you can get up there. Just try to time it with decent light and spend some time. But you can walk all the way around the tower, so you get views in every direction. So that is just absolutely stunning. I would say the second thing is the Charles Bridge. And so the Charles Bridge is the famous bridge, and it's super crowded all during regular daytime, and even into the evening, it's really crowded. So I highly recommend you get up as early as you can stand to get up. I think I got up at 4 a.m. and headed over there. But I had it almost to myself. There were 2 or 3 people here and there that wandered across the bridge. I'm guessing they were coming home from a late night of revelry. But based on how they were acting, singing and laughing and all that. So I'm guessing their night was ending and my day was beginning. But the Charles Bridge is just absolutely incredible. And the cool thing about it is there's a tower on either end that's open during the daytime. You can pay to go up in these towers. And again, you get a great view over the bridge, and you get a nice skyline view as well there. And then I would say the third is really just wandering some of the streets in the old town, and no street in particular, just wandering around. You see some of the towers that are connected to Charles Bridge, some of the towers that used to be, I think, part of the fortifications that surrounded this city, I think. Again, I kind of like things when they're a little bit less crowded. So I tend to do this stuff early in the morning because, here's a travel tip for you, if you will. And that is when people travel to places like this, at least Americans that I've talked to and my friends, they're like, oh yeah, we're on vacation. We go out, we stay out late, we have parties or whatever, and then we sleep in, and then we get up and we do it again. Well, great. While they're sleeping in, I'm out on the streets. So, what I've found over time is that people are on a holiday. A lot of the people are when they're in central London or central Prague or central Paris. And if they're sleeping in the morning, that's a perfect time for me to get up and explore, because I can walk right up to places that I literally couldn't even get close to other times of day, including at sunset, because everybody's awake at sunset, generally speaking. So in sunrise, it's hard to get up, but I just think it's so worth it.
Great. All right. So, and now I'm inviting myself. I come to Austin and you pick me up and say, all right, Vinelli, let's go. What are some of your favorite spots in Austin? And by the way, my son says I have a habit of inviting myself places.
Yeah. No, come on down. Just don't come in the summer because sunsets are like at 10 o'clock and it's so hot and humid. It's just horrible, I think. But this is a good time of year to visit, like in the fall. So there's a lot of architecture. I would say the first thing I always take people to do is shoot the skyline. So there's an area along the river right across from the skyline. So if you do a long exposure, you can get nice reflections of the skyline in the river. So I recommend like a long exposure. So tripod, and you could do a medium range zoom, like a 24-70. You don't really need a wide angle, but a medium for that. So that's one of my favorite things to do, especially like at blue hour and sunset where you get the reflections and the lights come on. The second thing is you got to get a sunset out at the Loop 360 bridge. So that's out west of town. It's actually not too far from where I live. And I've shot there so many times because it's close to home, and it's just, you get a great viewpoint if you hike up to the top of these rocks. So that's probably the most popular place for sunset. And then the third is, I'd probably say just some of the street scenes around downtown. We've got an entertainment district. We've got several streets that are full of, restaurants and bars and shops and things like that. And I think they're fun to walk around and shoot in. I find myself every once in a while just like itching to get back down there, even though I've got, literally thousands of photos from these spots. I just like to go back because it's kind of fun to wander with the camera. And that's where I'll just, have just like a single prime lens, something that shoots, pretty wide open, like f2 or 1.8 or 1.4 or something, and just walk around and just grab some shots. So I would say that'd be the third.
That's great. Now, and I mentioned this earlier, if you're not used to doing this on your own, by all means, take a tour. But you give a lot of tours, and there's a lot of our friends that do tours. Spend the extra money because, could you imagine spending a couple thousand, if not more, to fly over to England, and you're expecting to get all these beautiful shots, but you don't know where to go? And
yeah, absolutely. Tours are great for that. Absolutely.
So that's great. And speaking of tours, this is pretty amazing. So Skylum is going to have their first ever Luminar Photo Camp in Iceland. So I just got the internal memo, and I can actually share it because this will be broadcasting by the time the embargo about talking about it is over. So, but it's a one. I guess it's going to be one day dedicated to the unique Iceland experience, where it'll be an off-road tour of the ice caves. Mm-hmm. There'll be live workshops on the landscapes and the post-processing in Luminar, and then all workshops and master classes, which I thought is going to be really cool. It's going to be recorded and available for the participants after the camp. How many times have we gone to, conferences in the past, and you got like Photoshop World, you got everything all set, you're excited, you hop on an airplane, and whatever happens at 30,000 feet, it's like everything evaporates out of your mind.
Yeah, exhaustion. Exactly. That's in too.
But I'm glad to see that they're recording it. And then, of course, there'll be a bunch of photography masters and the instructions and helping. So how are they separating the groups and stuff? What are they doing?
Yeah, so they're going to take 36 campers, let's call them, or participants, and they're going to divide them into 3 groups of 12. And so they've got 6 of the global ambassadors or global masters, and these are amazing photographers like Yuri Belagurshi, who runs Iceland Photo Tours. So like if you want to see Iceland, like he would be the guy to see it with, and he's one of the leaders. Serge Romali, Daniel Corden, Albert Dross, Jason Charles Hill, and Emily Ristevsky. So, they're just literally some amazing photographers. So anyway, they're going to have 36 participants, 3 groups of 12. And so 2 masters and 2 Skyloom team members are going to join each group of 12. So it's going to be a group of 12 with 2 masters and 2 Skyloom folks. So 4 folks supporting 12 participants. And each group's going to have a different schedule, but every group is going to end up visiting the same locations just on different days. And so everybody's going to see the same stuff, just not on the same day. So it's going to be pretty amazing.
So there's going to be a lot of hands-on
I'm
training,
excited.
plus the participants, like I said, receive the recording. And it's funny because I looked on the list, we have Dima and Alex going. So you have the co-founder of the company and the brains behind Luminar,
Right.
and then you have Alex, who's the CEO. When we were at Photo Plus, I was amazed. He was out in the trenches with us teaching Luminar to people walking by. And one of the
Right.
gentlemen made a comment, and he looked at me and said, "Wow, that guy really knows his stuff." I said, "I hope so. He's the CEO." He looked at me and said, "Are you serious? The CEO is out here actually giving the demos?" I go, "Yeah, right next to him is the co-founder and the guy who's writing the software." You would have thought that I just gave everyone a huge Christmas present. So they all got excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're passionate users, right? In addition to leading the company and then coming up with the ideas. I mean, they're obviously passionate. And Ivan's going to be there, Kutanen, who's a VP of engineering, I think, or something. So super, super smart and knows the ins and outs. So it's going to be an amazing group and amazing.
He's turned into a great photographer too. I'm watching a lot of his stuff.
No, he's
if people are interested in it, it's at skylum.com/camp. Skylum.com/camp. Now, Jim, if we want to find out more about you, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, great question. I appreciate that. So, I do have my blog, which is nomadicpursuits.com or just jimnix.com. They both work. But, truthfully, most of my time I spend creating Luminar tutorials for YouTube. And so if you just go on YouTube and look up Jim Nix, or if you just go to youtube.com/Jim Nix, you'll find me there. But I've got literally hundreds of tutorials about how to use the Luminar. And I'm in the middle of a series right now about Luminar 4, which is getting a lot of feedback, a lot of engagement and interaction. It's been a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun with Luminar 4 myself. So that's probably the best place to find me is there on YouTube.
That's great. Hey, Jim, thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule today and giving us your little expertise on areas for us to go out and photograph.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity and have a great one. I'm sure I'll talk to you again soon.
I'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
You are listening to the InFocus Interview Show. If you like these interviews, be sure to subscribe to our weekly Photofocus podcast on photofocus.com. Thank you for joining us.